The increment operator is represented by plus plus, and the decrement operator is represented by minus minus. Here are some examples. In this example, x is initialized to 5. X plus plus semicolon statement increase the value of x by 1, making it equal to 6. The x minus minus statement then decreases the value of x by 1, making it equal to 5 again. The increment and the decrement operators can be used in several ways, depending on where they are placed in the expression. For example, the plus plus x statement increments the value of x by 1 before assigning it to y. So both x and y are equal to 6. The x minus minus statement assigns the current value of x to z before decreasing it by 1. So z is equal to 6, while x is equal to 5 again. It is important to note that the increment and the decrement operators can have different effects depending on where they are used, such as in a loop or a conditional statement. Additionally, they can be used with other operators and expressions to perform more complex operators. In C++, the while loop is a control flow statement that allows a block of code to be executed repeatedly while a certain condition is true. The syntax for a while loop is as follows. The condition is an expression that is evaluated at the beginning of each iteration of the loop. If the condition is true, the code block is executed. If the condition is false, the loop terminates and the control is passed to the next statement after the loop. Here is the example of a while loop that prints the numbers from 1 to 10. In this example, the I variable is initialized to 1 before the loop. The condition I less or equal to 10 is evaluated at the beginning of each iteration of the loop. If the condition is true, the code block is executed, which prints the value of I to the console and increments I by 1. This process continues until the condition is false, which happens when I reaches 11. The while loop can also be used with other control flow statements, such as if and break, to create more complex programs. It is important to be careful when using while loops, as an infinite loop can occur if the condition is never false, which can cause the program to crash or hang. In a while loop in C++, break and continue are control flow statements that allow you to alter the flow of the loop execution. The break statement is used to terminate the loop immediately, even if the loop condition is still true. Here's an example of using break in a while loop. In this example, the loop prints the value of I to the console on each iteration, but terminates immediately when I is equal to 5. The break statement causes the loop to exit before it reaches the end of the code block. So in this case, the loop terminates after printing the value 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the console. Since I is equal to 5 on the next iteration, if I = 5 break. So the loop is terminated by the break statement. The continue statement is used to skip the current iteration of the loop and move on to the next one. Here's an example of using continue in a while loop. In this example, the loop prints only the odd numbers from 1 to 10 by skipping it over the even numbers using the continue statement. When I is even, the loop skips the rest of the code block and moves on to the next iteration. The loop starts with I initialized to 1. On each iteration, the loop checks if I is even by using the module operator. If I is even, I increase by 1, and then the continue statement is executed, and the loop skips over the rest of code block, which include cout I and I++, and moves on to the next iteration. If I is odd, the if statement condition fails, so it will execute cout I, which prints the value of I to the console and increments I by 1. In this block of code, the loop prints only the odd numbers from 1 to 10, which are 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Counters can be used in while loops to keep track of the numbers of times a certain event occurs or the number of times a function is called. Here's an example. This C++ code prompts the user to enter their scores for multiple tests, calculate the total score and the average score, and then outputs the average score to the console. The code starts by defining a constant number of tests with a value of 5. It then defines variables to store the individual score for each test score, and the total score, and the average score. A test variable is also defined to control the loop. The while loop uses the test variable to prompt the user to enter their score for each test. The score variable is used to store the user's input, and the total variable is incremented by the score on each iteration of the loop. After the loop is finished, the average score is calculated by dividing the total score by the number of tests constant. Finally, the code outputs a message to the console that includes the number of tests constant and the average variable. This code can be modified to accept a variable number of test scores by changing the number of tests constant to a user input or by using dynamic memory allocation. In programming, a sentinel value is a special value that is used to indicate the end of a sequence of input data. In a while loop, a sentinel value can be used to control the loop and terminate it when the sentinel value is encountered. Here's an example of using a sentinel value in a while loop to read input from the user until the user enters a specific value, in this case, -1. So in this example, the while loop continues to execute as long as the user doesn't enter the sentinel value of -1. On each iteration of the loop, the user is prompted to enter a number. If the user enters the sentinel value, the loop terminates and the control is passed to the next statement after the loop. A while loop is a common construct used in data validation to repeatedly prompt the user for input until valid data is entered. Data validation is an important process that ensures that the input provided by the user is valid and acceptable for further processing. This C++ code prompts the user to input their choice of drink and validates the input to ensure that it is a number from 0 to 4. The code starts by displaying a menu of drink choices using cout. The user is then prompted to enter their choice of drinking using cin, and the input is stored in the beverage variable. A while loop is used to check validity of the input. The loop continues to execute as long as the beverage variable is less than 0 or greater than 4, which indicates that the input is invalid. Inside the loop, an error message is displayed to the user using cout, prompting them to re-enter a valid input. The input is then read in again using cin and stored in the beverage variable. The loop will keep repeating until the user enters a valid choice of drink, at which point the loop will terminate and the control will pass to the next statement after the loop. The do-while loop is a type of loop in C++ that is similar to the while loop, but with a key difference. In a do-while loop, the loop body is executed at least once, regardless of whether the loop condition is true or false. Here's the basic syntax of a do-while loop in C++. In this syntax, the loop body is executed first, and then the loop condition is checked. If the condition is true, the loop body is executed again, and this process repeats until the condition is false. In this code, the value of I is initialized to 0. Then a do-while loop is executed. The loop body consists of a cout statement that outputs the value of I, followed by the increment of I by 1. The loop condition I less than 0 is then checked. Since the initial value of I is 0, the loop condition is false from the start. However, since this is a do-while loop, the loop body is executed at least once regardless of the loop condition. Therefore, the output of this code would be 0. This is because the loop body is executed once and the value of I is printed to the console before the loop condition is checked. Since the loop condition is false, the loop terminates after the first iteration. Therefore, the output of this code is a single line containing the value of I, which is 0. A for loop is a type of loop in C++ that is used to iterate over a range of values. It is often used when the number of iterations is known in advance. Here's the basic syntax of a for loop in C++. In this syntax, the initialization statement is executed once before the loop starts, and is used to initialize the loop counter or other variables. The condition statement is checked before each iteration of the loop, and the loop continues to execute as long as the condition is true. The increment or decrement statement is executed after each iteration of the loop, and it is used to update the loop counter or other variables. This program prompts the user to input a positive integer, calculates the mean average of the positive integers, and outputs the result to the console. Here's how the program works. The main function begins by declaring several variables: value, total, number, and mean. The value variable is used to store the user's input, while the other variables are used to calculate and store the mean average for the integers. Value in this program also refers to the number of integers. The user is prompted to enter a positive integer using cout and cin. The input value is then stored in the value variable. An if statement is used to check if the value is greater than 0. If it is, a for loop is used to calculate the sum of positive integers. The loop iterates from 1 to value, and on each iteration, the loop counter number is added to the total variable using total equal total plus number statement. Once the loop has finished executing, the mean average of the positive integers is calculated by dividing the total by value and storing the result in mean variable. The static _cast operator is used to convert total to a float before performing the division, to ensure that the result of the division is floating point value. Finally, the result is output to the console using cout along with an appropriate message. A nested loop is a loop within another loop. The basic syntax for a nested loop is: there is an outer loop that runs from I equals 0 to I less than n, and an inner loop that runs from j equals 0 to j less than n for each iteration of the outer loop. The inner loop body executes for each value of j, and the outer loop body executes for each value of I. This program prompts the user to input the number of students and the number of hours each student spent programming over a long weekend. The program then calculates the average number of hours per day spent programming by each student and outputs the result to the console. Here is how the program works. The main function begins by declaring several variables: num students, num hours, total, average, count 1, and count 2. The num students variable is used to store the user's input, while the other variables are used to calculate and store the average number of hours per day spent programming by each student. The user is prompted to enter the number of students using cout and cin. The input value is then stored in the num students variable. A for loop is used to iterate over each student. The outer loop iterates from 1 to num students, and the inner loop iterates from 1 to 3 for each student. On each iteration of the inner loop, the user is prompted to enter the number of hours worked by the current student on the current day and the input value is added to the total variable. Once the inner loop has finished executing for a given student, the average number of hours per day spent by programming by that student is calculated by dividing the total by 3 and storing the result in average variable. The result is output to the console using cout along with an appropriate message. Here's one example of the output. The program prompts the user to enter the number of students, which is 3 in this case, and then prompts the user to enter the number of hours each student spent programming on each of the 3 days. The program then calculates the average number of hours per day spent programming by each student and outputs the results to the console. Here's an example of how to read input from a file. In this example, we use the ifStream class to read input from a file named input.txt. We then check if the file was successfully opened using an if statement. If the file was not opened successfully, we print an error message to the console and exit the program with an error code. Next, we declare an integer variable x to hold the data read from the file. We use a while loop to read each integer value from the file using the extract operator, which reads data from the input stream and stores it in the variable x. We then print the value of x to the console using cout. Finally, we close the input file using close method of the ifStream class. Here is an example of how to write output to a file. We use the offstream class to write output to a file named output.txt. We then check if the file was successfully opened using an if statement. If the file was not opened successfully, we print an error message to the console and exit the program with an error code. Next, we use a for loop to write the values 1 through 10 to the file using the insertion operator, which writes data to the output stream. We then close the output file using the close method of the offstream class. Let's write a program that reads a list of numbers from a file and calculates the sum and the average of the numbers. Once all numbers have been read, the program should output the sum and the average to the console. Additionally, the program should also output the largest and the smallest numbers in the list. So the program should first prompt the user for the name of the input file. Second, open the input file and check if it was opened successfully. If not, print an error message and exit the program. Third, read each number from the file and add it to the running total. Fourth, keep track of the largest and the smallest numbers as the programs read each number. Fifth, once all numbers have been read, calculate the average by dividing the sum by the number of numbers. Sixth, output the sum, average, largest, and the smallest numbers to the console. This piece of code includes the necessary libraries for input and output operations, IOStream, and file input-output operations, ifStream. This prompts the user to enter the name of the input file and reads it into a string variable called filename. This creates an input file stream object called InFile and opens the file specified by file name. If the file cannot be opened, for example, if it doesn't exist, the program outputs an error message to the console and exits with an error code of 1. These lines declare and initialize several variables used in the program. Num to hold each number read from the file. Sum to hold the running total of numbers. Count to keep track of how many numbers were read, and the largest and the smallest to keep track of the largest and smallest numbers read so far. int_mean and int_max are constants that represent the smallest and the largest possible integer values, respectively. This is the main loop of the program. It reads each number from the input file using InFile extract num, updates the running total, sum, and the count, and checks if the current number is larger or smaller than the current largest or smallest number read so far. It will update the variable largest or smallest if the num is greater than largest or num is less than smallest. The loop continues until all numbers in the file have been read. This closes the input file stream. Finally, the program checks if any numbers were read from the file, counter greater than 0. If so, it calculates the average value by dividing the sum by the count and outputs the sum, average, largest and smallest values to the console using cout. If no numbers were found in the file, it outputs an approp message to the console. So this code avoids divide by 0 logical error. Hello, let's do an exercise. It's after chapter 5, pennies for pay. Write a program that calculates how much a person would earn over a period of time if his or her salary is 1 penny the first day, and 2 pennies the second day, and it continues to double each day. The program should ask the user for the number of days. Display a table showing how much the salary was for each day, and then show the total pay at the end of the period. The output should be displayed in a dollar amount, not the number of pennies. Input validation. Don't accept a number less than 1 for the number of days worked. So from here we have the information. The input is the number of days. And we should validate. It shouldn't be less than 1. The calculation is the first day is 1 penny. The second day is 2 penny. Third day is 4 penny. Fourth day is 8 penny. So each day it doubles. So we should write a loop to output the days and the pay for that days. Also, we should have an accumulator to add up all the payments. And we display this. The display will look like a table. Here is we declare the variables. We get input days and validate it. Then we calculate the salary. We have a loop to do that, right? Day 1, we calculate the payment. Day 2, calculate the payment. And we also display each day and the payment. And the inside loop, we also can use accumulator to add all payments together. Then after the loop, we can display the grand total. Let's start from an empty project. The first thing is we want to type in some comment. Chapter 5, pennies for pay. Then we have a hashtag include IOStream. Also have a hashtag include IOmanip, because we know we will do some formatting. Then using namespace std semicolon. Then integer main function, curly braces. The first thing is declare variable. So we know that we will input days. So it'll be integer, right? Day cannot be decimal point. So integer, let's say max days. So the user will input this max days. Also, the payment should be double, right? Because it's a decimal like a pennies. So double pay. And we will add all the payments together. So let's have another variable double grand total equal 0. So if you want to sum up the numbers, you must initialize the sum. Here the grand total is like a sum. You must initialize. Otherwise, the variable will contain trash values and the result will not be correct. So you need to initialize. Then we say we initialize the pay, which is from 1 penny. So 1 penny, because we are going to output as a dollar, so 1 penny is 0.01 dollar. The next one, we are going to get input from the user. See, we display a message for how many days will the pay double. Semicolon. And then we use seeing to get max days. The question tells us to validate this max days. The max days shouldn't be less than 1. So now we study the while loop, and then we can loop until the user have a valid input. So we have a while loop while max days is less than 1. So the condition after the while is enclosed in the round parentheses. Then have curly braces, the block of code after the while. So while this happens, what we do is we output the error message to tell the user to input again. So we say cout the number of days must be at least 1. Please input again. Then we're seeing this input, the variable max days. So this loop will execute until there's a valid max days get input. So when the max days is greater or equal than 1, the while conditions become false. So the loop will stop. Next thing, we know we will display a table. So the table must have some head to represent the column. Right? So let's see, we have cout. First column is days. Then for the table, we can use a \t. That's a tab, \t. And have total pay ENDL. So let's see what it look like. Return 0. Let's build. Let's see, I have 0 for the days. So it says I must input again. I have a negative numbers. Okay, then I put a 5. So this a day, and the total day will be the head of the table. The columns are day and the total pay. They are separated by 2 tabs. Next, we will write a loop. So inside loop, we will display the day and display the pay for that day. Also, we will have accumulate. The accumulator is to add up all the payments. This time we'll use for loop. So for integer day equal 1, start from day 1. This day, day works like a counter. So integer day equal 1, semicolon, that's the initial number. Then day less or equal than max days. Semicolon, then day plus plus. So the condition is enclosed in the round parentheses. And then in the block, we also have curly braces inside. We see out day. And we also have formatting, same as the table head, 2T, \T. And it will be $. Then we continue to output pay in DL. And the grand total is the accumulator to add up the pay. So it should be grand total equal grand total plus pay. You can also write like I comment this grand total plus equal pay. So this statement and this statement are equivalent. They're the same. Then the next one is we need to update the pay. So pay equal to pay multiply 2, right? Because yes, each day the payment will be doubled. Of course, you can also say pay multiply equal to. So those are the same. So I just put a comment as a comment. So this loop, we output the day 1, right? The pay for the day 1. Then grand total, we add the day 1 payment to grand total. Then we double. And in the for loop, it will check because day 2 is less than the max days. It will display the day 2, the payment for the day 2, then add to the grand total. So we'll keep doing all those until when the day is less and until the day reaches the max days. Let's run, see what we have right now. Let's see, 5. it will output the number of days and the pay for each day. So we finished the for loop, and after the loop, we can print out the grand total. So let's say Cout, we add some dash sign to separate so this line of dash will separate the table, and we say Cout total we also separate the \t, two tabs. Then the variable grand total, because it contains the value of the total in DL. Okay, so let's run it. 5. Okay, so 5 days, it's 31 cents. You may think it was paid so little. Let's see, after the people work for 100 days, how much he get? 100. Wow. So after 100 days, the daily salary is very high. The grand total is so huge. The number is in exponential format. So we want to show that's in dollar format. Dollar, then 0.00, that's for cents. So let's do the formatting. We want to show the point, and we want to set precision to. So before we output anything, here we can say Cout fixed, so it will show the decimal point. Show point, set precision to. Now let's run. It's better. Now look this dash line, which separate the individual days and the total. Here we just say Cout, then we just randomly put some dash lines. Are you able to write something? So the dash line, the length will change dynamically according to the length of the numbers. I will leave this question to you. If you figure it out, please let me know. You will have an extra credit. I think I should also put the dollar sign before the grand total. 100 right now has a dollar sign. So if you figure out how to dynamically increase this dash line according to the number of the digits, please let me know, and you can earn the credit.